I want to welcome Wally Banzhaf with us today. Thank you for being here. I have a, yes, thank you.
Wait till you see if you want to do it at the end. Don't applaud now.
Wally did this at the library, what, a few months ago?
This is the fourth time, so I did a library about a month and a half ago, yeah.
So I appreciate you being here. Just a quick bio about Wally that he sent me. So Wally grew up in the Bronx, New York, and couldn't wait to leave New York City. Went to college for 6 years in Troy, New York. Living in Troy made him quickly realize that New York City wasn't so bad after all. Wally earned a bachelor's degree and master's degree in electrical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Wow. He married Maddie in June 1968 and began working at the Navy Underwater Sound Lab, also known as the NUSL, in New London. They lived in Ledyard for 4 years. Wally started in submarine sonar and quickly moved to the submarine antenna branch of the NSUL. 6 months after beginning work at the NSUL, he was voluntold to go to sea on a research vessel in early January 1969. And today you'll hear how well that assignment went in a few minutes. Okay. Thank you for being here. Do you need anything else from me?
No, I think we're good.
I'll stick around for a few to make sure we don't have any audio, video issues.
Okay. I'm a little disappointed that, all right. Can you still spell Rensselaer? Because I can't. I was kidding the people in the front row that a 5 cubic foot tank of seawater is going to come in for a realistic show for you guys. So everyone in the front had a swim, but it wasn't available. I couldn't afford it. So in any event, let's get going. So there it is. So I live in Tarryville. I've 44 years. I'm a newcomer in Tarryville. The neighbors will not yet talk to me. And I was in the volunteer fire company for 33 years. But when you hit 70, I know you're saying that guy can't be 70, but when you hit 70, they say sayonara, which is you're retired. They don't want me driving a fire truck. What if something happens? So whatever. But it was great. I really enjoyed the fire department, and I hope none of you have ever had to call them, but if you did, you probably got real good results. I hope. Anyhow, please, if there's any questions, ask them. Don't hold on to the question till the end because you may have forgotten it or I will forget the answer. So here we go. So I started out in 1969, like Kathy said, working for the Navy. It was my first real job. And I fell asleep at the desk a few times until I figured out it's awful working 8 hours a day. I mean, I was unused to that as a student. But so here's what happened in a capsule. At the top left, you'll see the Sea Surveyor. The Sea Surveyor was a civilian boat owned by Electric Boat, which is a division of General Dynamics. They're in Groton, Connecticut, and they build one thing, which is submarines, nuclear submarines. So the boat was owned by. The Sea Surveyor was owned by by Electric Boat, and they build submarines. So we were going to go out in this thing into the Atlantic Ocean in January and do something. I'll tell you more about it later. So we're going to meet up with a submarine like this, although it wouldn't look like that in the ocean. A real submarine does not like to be caught, so to speak, in its underwear. It likes to be under the surface where it's covert and very, very hard to find. In fact, I just read a wonderful book because even with 4 years working for the Navy, I never really went aboard. I went aboard. I never went to sea on a submarine, and I never learned much about them except the little part that I was responsible for, which was right at the top, antennas for submarines. So we were going to meet this guy a couple hundred miles south of Nantucket, a few hundred miles east of Delaware and Virginia, and we're going to send some signals to it. And they were going to stick up one of these masts and see if they could pick up the signals, and if it did, if the new system, which was secret classified at the time, if it, are we okay in the back?
I'm stretching.
You're stretching, okay. I thought it was some magic signal, goal or something. Okay, so what happened is when we left New London, the sea was pretty calm. When we got out a couple hundred miles out, we're in a gale and nasty, nasty waves. And the wind was blowing 50 miles per hour. It was quite a storm. So, moving on. What happened next is the Sea Surveyor flipped upside down and sank. There were 12 men aboard. It happened very quickly. Now, very quickly, 40 minutes, that's not very quick. It is when you're trying to figure out what's going on, find your life jacket and say, is this really happening? Oh my God, where's the life raft? So it happened really quick. We hopped into a life raft. This is a slightly smaller one. Our life raft was meant for 15 people, and we were 12 in number. So there was plenty of room for moving around and so on. Life raft was great. It was our home for 27 hours. At one point, it flipped upside down. And of the 12 men, 8 of them went out into the cold Atlantic. I was one of them. And then we righted the raft and we climbed back in. So we were 12 in the raft again. We were going to die because of hypothermia. It was cold. The waves were breaking into the raft. There was nothing we could do. We were sitting in cold water. And if we didn't get rescued very, very soon, we're going to die of hypothermia, which is not a bad way to go, I'm told. It's a very pleasant way. But I wasn't really that anxious right then. Question?
How far was the submarine from where you were when you went?
We don't know. This is the Navy, and the Navy has logs available online. I've spent hundreds, I'm not going to say thousands, but many hundreds of hours trying to find out the official report from the Coast Guard about what happened.
You weren't in communication with them then?
No, we were not. We were finally rescued by a large ship. It was an ore carrier. I guess you call it a specialized freighter. It was a beautiful ship. Oh boy, was it beautiful, because we're alive. And it was 825 feet long, and it was carrying coal from Virginia to Holland for the industries and homes there. So there's this gentleman named Adrian Lane. He was the captain of the ship. He was this incredible man. He was certified by the Coast Guard for, if this means anything to someone here who's nautical, all vessels, power and sail, all waters of the world. So he could go from a canoe up to, one of the giant cruise ships that we have now, which dwarf the Christine, Essie Christine, that saved our lives. And he was a great guy, and he in fact saved our lives. And if he didn't do what he did real quick, I wouldn't be here today, despite my vast saltwater experience. Don't be laughing. I was born in the Bronx, and I guess there's salt water somewhere around there. I did ride the Staten Island ferry out and back, saw the Statue of Liberty twice. We went a circle line around Manhattan, and that was a lot of nice time. I found out that a hot dog that would cost $1 if you bought it from a street vendor was $6 aboard the circle line. So there were many lessons that I learned. So there I was, 22, just been married, just started my career. The Sea Surveyor was at that point 30 years old. It was built in 1939 as a ferry on the St. Lawrence Seaway. If you've ever been up to Montreal or Quebec City or anywhere along there, it's a river. It's not a tiny river like we have flowing through Simsbury and Terriffill, but you don't get 20, 15-foot waves on the St. Lawrence Seaway. Yeah. And you rarely get 50 mile an hour winds, but it was designed as a ferry. Electric Boat bought it in 1965. They outfitted it as a research vessel. So right now, I guess looking around the audience, if I mention I have a bit of CRS, you'll understand that means can't remember accurately. So please forgive any memory lapses. If you ask a question, I won't fake it. I learned that long ago when I was teaching at the University of Hartford. If you don't know the answer, don't say it. So 53 years ago is when the thing sank. Oh, by the way, and why were the chances of anyone surviving? Well, number one, it was a little raft. It was a big storm, giant waves, and as I mentioned, the raft got flipped over once, capsized. It was going to happen again and again. The storm was worsening. So that's why it was very close to zero chance. So there we go. Mostly after it did St. Lawrence Seaway, they sold it to the Caribbean, the owners from Canada, and it carried beer and chickens in the Caribbean back and forth from island and people. And then it was in the Gulf of Mexico for a while, maybe servicing oil rigs, we're not sure. And then 30 years after that, EB bought it and they made it into a research vessel. So what is the research vessel? That's a side view of it. And let me see if I can do this amazing thing. Can I do this? No, I'm not going to bother. I'll use a pointer. Up here is a runabout boat. It's not a lifeboat. It's more like a Zodiac inflatable boat. It's meant for running around doing little things. So if the crane here puts a sauna buoy into Long Island Sound and they need to go and adjust it or do something, they would use this little boat instead of trying to bring the enormous boat, 118 feet long, 28 feet wide. The draft is how much of it sticks down from the water? 6.5 feet. And there's a lot of stuff above there. So when you're on the St. Lawrence Seaway, maybe it rocks a little bit. When you're in a gale in the North Atlantic in January, well, you'll find out. It has an anti-roll tank here. It has a counterbalance tank. What you don't see here, by the way, is the two things. One was mounted here on the starboard side, one was on the port side, and it was a life raft. You wouldn't look at it and say it's a life raft unless you knew. It's like a giant garbage can of fiberglass, and when you throw it in the water and pull, it goes and a life raft appears. It's a miracle. It has everything in it. You'll see it now on ferries. If you do any traveling, you'll also see it on cruise boats. They're wonderful, life-saving things. It has a canopy over it, which keeps the rain and the elements off. May even keep you a little bit warm if you have enough people in it throwing out heat. There were 2 of them aboard the Sea Surveyor. That's not what you see here. So what's the story? We were about where you see this little dot here, this yellow arrow. So just to orient you, up here is Providence, Cape Cod. Over here is Delaware and Virginia. We were a long way from land. Some have told me that a ship like the Sea Surveyor, the way it was configured and built in 1939 as a ferry, should never have been more than a few miles from land, ever.
Looked like it was top heavy.
Yeah, very top heavy.
Naval architect in the front row says it's top heavy. I could not agree with you more. I'm not a naval architect. I can just tell you what happened. So we were in when we left. Well, let's move on. What we were going to do, by the way, is we were going to go to that location approximately. We never made it. We never made it to the location. We never saw the submarine. They never were aware of us being there. And what the submarine was going to do is sit there at periscope depth. So it'd be below the surface, stick up one mast, and we would radiate signals to that, RF signals, radar, voice signals, whatever. We would radiate it from this little guy here, which is the Sea Surveyor. The antennas we were going to put on the next morning, but we never got to do it, were all pointed from the port side away from the ship. So when we're here, we're heading towards the submarine. When we're here, we're also pointing at the submarine, no matter where we were. And we're going to steam around it several times, maybe 2 miles distant. And the submarine was going to hopefully see there's radar, certain pulse repetition frequency, certain frequency, certain type of modulation, and they would then be able to know when it finally got approved at sea, it's a Chinese destroyer, or it's an aircraft belonging to the Russians, or who else don't we get along with these days? North Korea and Cuba and whatever. So it would give immediate information to the submarine. If it's a fishing boat from Gloucester, that's fine. They don't really care about that. But if it's a potential problem from them, from an enemy standpoint, they dive right away. They're gone. So remember, the only thing they've stuck up is one mast. They got a picture of what's around, and they would go away. It was a secret device. There were only 2 on the planet at the time. This was going to be tested at sea for the first time. So this is a submarine not in the middle of the ocean. This is probably in the, pardon me for saying, the Thames River in New London. and it's either going in or out from the sub base or from electric boat. So there you see the what's called the sail. The sail is this thing here. These are the sail planes, which are just like airplane wings. And when the thing is moving underwater, it's like flying a plane. And you have tail planes or stern planes, and you have sail planes. And right now, this guy is either under its own power or being towed by a tugboat. But that's not what they look like in the ocean. You'd never see that. If you did, the submarine has serious problems, like it lost its reactor, and it would have to come to the surface to use the diesel. Anyhow, speed is of the essence. Speed is of the essence. So as soon as they can say there's a Chinese aircraft with weapons on it, they would dive. If it was a fishing boat, they would not be concerned. So this was me looking out the window, except it was nighttime, when we left New London, Groton actually, and we're heading out to sea. The water was calm, absolutely beautiful. There was thin layer of ice, and as the ship went out, it was cutting through this maybe 1/8 inch layer of ice. Couldn't walk on it, but it was just kind of neat. It was so cold, by the way, that's why. And that's largely salt water down there. If you go up towards Norwich, it gets to be really fresh water, but when you're down near the Long Island Sound, it's salt water, which doesn't freeze at normal temperatures for a lake.
You know why they picked that particular type, that year, month to do this? When they have picked a warmer time of the year?
Real men don't really care about temperature. I, on the other hand,
You're in that cold.
I was 22. I'm still a kid, so yeah. No, I don't know why. Maybe they wanted to get it done. Maybe it had already been postponed. When you have secret clearance, which I did, you know this much about that much. So I knew the frequencies I was going to put out, type of modulation. I knew the day we're going to meet. I knew how far we're going to be. I knew the name of the vessel, the USS Greenling, nuclear attack submarine, and not much more. So no, I don't know why. So I went to sleep. It was cold. It was wicked cold out, but I was in a nice warm stateroom. Remember, this ferry went up and down the St. Lawrence Seaway carrying people. It never carried cars. It had no capability of vehicles. So the staterooms were nice. They had hand-rubbed mahogany and very comfortable beds. So I went to sleep. And now here we are. It's the next morning. That was me. And yeah, the storm was getting worse and worse. So all night we're bouncing around, and by the time I woke up, the thought of having breakfast or lunch or anything was off the table. Not going to happen. And we're just bouncing around. Things were getting bad very quickly. So when I woke up again, the bed that I was in, my back was against the wall. It wasn't 90 degrees, but it was maybe 30 or 40 degrees, so my back was laying against the wall. And I sensed something was not normal. Normally a ship will rock port, starboard, and so on. Here it was leaning only to port and rocking around that position. So it was definitely, as they say, it was not answering the helm. It was not responding to the throttle and the steering wheel and the rudder doing the stuff. So what did I do? I rushed to the lab room where we had all our equipment, big, heavy generators, RF signal generators, small transmitters, if you will. And I saw water sloshing on the floor. That told me, this is getting worse. So I grabbed all our manuals in case we needed them later, how to operate all the equipment, how to set everything. And I took it to my cabin for safekeeping. Yeah, okay. Only minutes later, 12 bells were done, really loud. Ding, 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 12 bells. They had a chart in the room I was in each stateroom, and it said 4 bells is this, you're changing shift, 8 bells is this, and that's how ships change the crew on watch, on engine duty, whatever. 12 bells had a separate meaning. It was abandoned ship. I said, well, there's got to be a problem here. Maybe, it's an error. 6 horn blasts. They have a foghorn aboard any ship that size, and it did 6 loud things. And then I hear people yelling, get your life jacket and come out to the port deck. So I did. And there was a life raft already thrown in the water. Some people had done it manually. They lifted it up and they threw it in the water, and then they pulled on a cord and it went and inflated. So there was our home ready for us. I'm not sure if I was number 9 or 10 or 11, but I didn't really count. I just jumped in with my life jacket. Woodpeckers. This is the actual life jacket I put on in my cabin and kept on for 27 hours in the life raft, including when I got dunked in the North Atlantic for about 10 minutes, and then we righted the raft and all that. I'll mention a special feature now, but if anyone would like to wear it later and have a picture taken, I was charging $20. I didn't make any money on the previous 3 showings. Like Simsbury people are cheap, and Granby where I did it, and I gave it in New London a week ago, and they're cheaper than here. So I've lowered it to $15. If I'm in the picture with you, who wants a picture without me in it? It's only $1.50. I lowered it from $2 to $1.50. So don't get your purses and wallets out now, but be aware. Okay. Okay, moving along. What is a painter? Well, does anyone recognize the top right gentleman?
Salvador Dali.
Hello, Dolly? Salvador Dali, exactly. He is a painter. That's not what I'm talking about. A painter on shipboard is this line that goes from the bow of a rowboat or the life raft, in that case, to another place. Over here it was to the sea surveyor. And that's a very important thing, because when you throw the life raft in, if you don't attach the painter, you're going to lose your life raft before everyone gets in. And in 15, 20-foot seas, you don't want to have to swim to the life raft. You probably couldn't swim to the life raft. So the painter was attached to the sea surveyor. How did we wind up? By the way, we were wearing what we were wearing when we ran out of our cabins in a hurry. So I had probably dungarees, I had a t-shirt and a very light ski jacket, and that's it. Shoes and socks also. So nobody prepared for being in a life raft in the ocean for 27 hours. It just would have taken too long to find in your suitcase or whatever. So here we are. The last person to leave the ship was the captain, Captain Adrian Lane. And he jumped, but just as he jumped, the wave moved the raft, and the captain fell in the water. Not the first time he'd been in salt water. He climbed in, and we said, okay, you'll dry off eventually. So he was unhurt. But very important, why do we want to cut the painter quickly? We didn't want to ride the sea surveyor down. Turns out the depth where we were was off the continental shelf, and it's about 2,000 fathoms, 6 feet per 1,000. So if you do the math, it's around 12,000 feet. Okay, it could be 11.5, it could be 12.5, it doesn't matter. And we said goodbye to the sea surveyor. What happened, the ship's bow went down first, and this is significant, we'll come to it later. Why did the bow go down so much? And then it rolled onto its side, and then it went nose down. And we're sitting in the life raft looking at this happening. This is a smaller life raft than the one we were in, but it's the only picture I could find. This is being shown in a yacht harbor, or a yacht place where you put your $1 million yacht. And they were trying to demonstrate this. Why don't you buy one of these for $40,000? You'll be glad you did if you ever need it. And so these were people from the Switlick company, which made it. This is probably an 8-person or so raft. Ours was 12 feet by 10 feet, designed for 15 people. So that's what we were in. Question? Yes?
Yeah, just to clarify, this vessel that you were on was originally built for river use?
St. Lawrence Seaway Ferry.
Okay. Did this vessel even have a keel? I mean, I can't imagine going out on the open seas without, in a vessel without a keel.
Where were you in 1969 when I needed you? See, you saw my vast saltwater experience. I didn't ask, hey, is there a keel on this vessel? Where was the picture? I got to show you. Oh.
It had a keel. This man says it had a keel. Okay.
I don't know if it had a keel. I don't see a keel on this thing, but I never really, and when it flipped over and sank, I didn't see a keel either, so it wasn't like a sailboat. Anyhow, so where are we? Salvador Dali. Yeah. By the way, this is a really tough little life raft. It got pounded, let me tell you, by waves. And I'm sure we were doing stupid things inside. There were knives inside. There was fishing tackle inside. But at no point did we ever have to use the patch kit or pump it up if it lost flotation. But there we are saying, is this really happening? I mean, I'm saying, okay, I know. I'm going to wake up and it'll be warm and I'll go down and I'll have a sandwich for lunch. But no, that wasn't it. I really thought that. Okay, so it was there for over 24 hours getting pounded with 12 people in it. Let me point out a couple of things. These are ballast bags. They're open to the sea, so they get filled immediately with seawater. Why would you want that on each side? Well, when the wind blows, it keeps you from getting flipped over. Unless you're in a real gale with 20-foot seas, in which case it slows you, but eventually you get flipped. This is a ladder for when 8 men got flipped out and we had to climb back in. They had ropes hanging over the side, so once it flipped, you grab the rope and you pulled from the other side. It's like hiking on a sailboat. You put your feet on a thing and you lean out and plop, plop, it comes down. 4 guys inside said, whoa, what did you just do? And then we climbed in, 8 of us, and we said, okay, when will this happen again? There wasn't.
You jump in and then pull the roof up? Like, how do you jump through the roof, the roof?
Oh, there is a canopy with an 2 inflation tubes and a heavy rubber vinyl over it. And then there were flaps at both ends of the raft. So you can see the flaps here. You could zip them up. If a 10-foot or 15-foot wave broke on the flap, it didn't hold. The water would come in, but you'd tighten the flap again and hope that it wouldn't happen again. So we're sitting in a foot of water.
But when you're jumping off the boat, there's no top on it yet?
There was a top, so we went right through that opening.
So you jumped to try to get
I think I went head first. It seemed like a good way to go. I was 22. I was pretty athletic at the time. Anyhow, so it was Rhino Tough. That's their motto. Glad we had it. So there we were. And I don't know if anyone recognizes this artist, but here's a little boat, and here's another little boat, and here's the sea. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but this is one of my favorite artists. He's Japanese, and his name is Hokusai, and he's famous for that painting. So the Sea Surveyor, as the ship sank, all its lights were on. In the front, there are navigation lights. If you go to sea at all, or you take the ferry to Block Island, something like that, you're going to see a green and a red, and that tells ships, okay, I'll go to the right and you go to the left or whatever. There were lights on the deck so you could walk around and do things. The ship is 20, 25 feet below the ocean, and the lights are still on. Later on, I found out the generator, which I can show you in the diagram again, is in a room inside the ship, and the door was closed. So there was plenty of oxygen, and there was no reason for the generator to stop generating until the seawater got in and drowned it. So there we watched the lights go. That was spooky, let me tell you. That freaked me out. So we're all sitting there. Very little talk went on. What are you going to say? Hey, how's your day going? I mean, the answer was clear. 5 minutes after we're in the raft. And we cut the painter. We cut the painter, free ourselves from watching the ship sink. And then we saw a light. This is great. There's a ship come to rescue us. How did they find us? It wasn't a ship. It was the other life raft. When the Sea Surveyor hit 25 or 30 feet, there's what's called a hydrostatic release. And a knife blade comes out and cuts the steel band over it, which then opened the steel band. The thing popped up to the surface, and then it started inflating. So there was a perfectly good 15-person life raft drifting away from us. And it was already maybe 100, 150 feet away. So we had 12 men with that's a lot of weight. We had 0 men in the other one, maybe a little bit of water. So we never saw it again. So that was not a rescue craft, that was the other life raft, which in calm water could be a very nice thing. It has a lot of survival equipment in it, but we never saw it again. By the way, for some reason, I don't know, maybe they said I'm sitting near the survival pouch inside, or maybe they thought I was an exception. Well, maybe they saw my SAT scores and saw I'm pretty good in English. So, well, they were good, and I was. So they said, read the booklet. It had a booklet, plus a lot of other things. It had, I'll tell you more about that. So I read the booklet, and I open it and it says, congratulations. Hundreds of people have been in the situation you're in now and survived just fine because they had the right equipment, and you're in it. That's a Switlik life raft. So here I am, about to die, and I'm reading a commercial. That was supposed to make us feel confident. This is going to turn out okay. Anyhow, there were supplies. What did we have? We had, we had an Arctic bladder, which was a big, like a rug underneath us with a top piece and a bottom piece of rubber and a little valve and a pump. And we went and pumped up the bladder, and that insulated our rear ends from the ocean. Until the first wave came in and filled the thing with a foot of water, in which case the Arctic bladder didn't do much, but maybe it gave a better ride bouncing up and down. I don't know. The reassurance was not very reassuring. So it kind of felt like this in our life raft. Again, that's a little exaggerated, but I put this together to give you an idea. Yeah. So you think I was seasick aboard the Sea Surveyor? Rocking back and forth, nice and slowly. This thing was ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. We were all violently ill. One of the survival equipments or pieces they had available was a rubber bailing bucket intended for water. So if water came in, you could scoop it out and throw it out, scoop it out and throw it out. Not once did we use it for water. It would have been labeled air sickness scoop if we were in an airplane. Amazingly, within an hour, maybe 2, we were all cured of our seasickness. Our bodies just said, you're either going to die or I'm going to get better. So it made us all better. There was no more seasickness. That's the one good thing about the waves. What we didn't know is how much luck we would need at this point. So, I'm going the wrong way, sorry. So a few hours, it's now dark. It's a little after midnight. When did this all occur? About 12:20. 20 minutes after midnight, the Sea Surveyor went down to its final resting point, and a ship came by. We didn't really see it coming. We tried to have watches out through each end to see if we could see anything, but this thing came, it was like 20, 25 feet away from us. If it had steered just a little bit or the wind had blown us, we would have been cut in half, or whatever happens when a 300-foot ship going 15 knots hits a life raft. But it didn't. I looked out, I could see the rivets on the black hull. That's how close it was. And we were waving the flashlight when we finally got close, when it got close enough, but nobody saw us. So we said, goodbye, have a nice day. That would have been great. That would have been a great story. Rescued an hour after sinking. Nah, it didn't happen. Okay. So now we're in a strong gale. The waves are getting bigger. If you're familiar with the Beaufort scale is, you're in deep sauce if you're in a Beaufort 9 or 10, unless you're in a giant ship and you have all kinds of stabilizing things. The Switlik company started out making parachutes. This parachute is not in the air, it's in water. And the purpose of it is when your ship sinks, you're going to drift away. You'll either be in a current, like the Gulf Stream, or you'll be in another current, or the wind will blow you. You want to stay as close to the point where you sank and gave a distress call. That question didn't get asked. Yes, somebody tried to give a distress call. It was the first mate who was operating the ship at the time when we realized it wasn't answering the helm. The captain came up and said, and this is why I love the guy, he didn't say, let's see, maybe we can turn on some pumps, go down below, see it. He just said, abandon ship. He had enough experience to say, going back 5 minutes and where we are now. Let's get the hell off while we still can. So if he hadn't made that snap, and for a captain of a ship to say abandon ship, I mean, that's part of his life, part of his soul, part of his reason for being on the planet. He just did it, and boy, are we glad he did. So there you are, and you want to minimize your drift, so you stay close to the point where the Mayday call was given. The Mayday call was given. It was heard, we were told later, from Maine to Florida from Coast Guard stations. Every ship that's going down punches in 2182, 2,182 kilohertz, or 2.182 megahertz, which is the International Maritime Distress Frequency. So ships monitor that, Coast Guard stations on shore monitor it. It was heard from Maine to Florida with the longitude being 10 degrees off. Now, at that latitude, which is above the equator, you saw where we were on the map, that's about 520 miles. Turns out there was a Coast Guard vessel very close to the wrong location, and it didn't hear anything, and it didn't see anything, and it kind of looked around and said, no, they ascribed it to being a hoax call. Some jerk with a transmitter, could be a ham radio operator, I'm one, but most hams are not jerks. They're very serious about helping people in distress rather than putting them in it. Anyhow, so that no rescue was started at that time. So the Mayday was ineffective. And you don't want to drift far from where you were, because how are they going to find you? So this is called a drogue, or a sea anchor, and its purpose is to slow how fast you drift through the water. On the modern ones, the tether, or the painter, if you will, from the drogue or sea anchor to the raft has a 3,000-pound braking force. Ours broke within the first 2 hours from the waves. You had a lot of mass in the thing, and you had a lot of, and the waves won. So we lost that. We're sitting with soggy bottoms and cold water. The Arctic bladder didn't do much. And we kept looking out through the flaps at both ends. We had watches posted. No ships appeared. So now it's night again. We were slowly starting to shiver, succumb to hypothermia. The gale was getting bigger and bigger. They said, we thought we saw a distant ship. It was so far away, but there's nothing else that'll have a bright white light on the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, except another ship or an airplane. So they said, Wally, you're sitting there. Why don't you open the parachute flare bag? So I reached in, got the waterproof bag for the parachute flare. What does a parachute flare do? It goes up into the sky, maybe a few hundred feet. It ignites a flare like you'd see on the highway when state police are throwing out flares at a big accident, and it burns all the way down. It says two things. It says, number one, there's people here that really need help. Number two, here's where they are. So what a great idea. So I reached out through the flap. I unzipped the flap. I had the parachute flare, took it out of the waterproof covering. I'm leaning out through the flap. Poof, we capsized. Yeah. So there I am swimming, but I'm holding on for dear life to that. Fortunately, one of the four men who stayed inside, I think it was our cook. He was kind of a goofy guy, someone you might see down at the train station or bus station every day, you know, going through, getting to the coin slots, looking for quarters and stuff. He was a nice guy, but, you know, anyhow, he held on to the flashlight, the one flashlight that remained. And we righted the raft, and there we were. So I got back in. We helped, all the guys out helped to right the raft inside, and we got back in. And I said, oh, this is it. This is the time. And I reached out through the flap again, pointed the flare up, the flare gun, and pulled the trigger, and it went fit, fish, well, whatever. I can't make the sound. It didn't ignite. It didn't go up a couple hundred feet. It sat in my hand and said, I'm a paperweight. There's nothing you can do with me right now. So there we were. We start waving the flashlight again. We didn't know if it was in fact a ship. We didn't know if it had seen us, but there we are. hoping that it was. This was kind of a low point in the experience. There were several low points, so we're getting through them now.
Can
Yeah.
I ask why you didn't use the parachute light with the prior ship?
Oh, the first ship?
Yeah, yes.
It was seen so, we didn't see it coming until it was just about on us.
Too late.
And it was kind of too late to get it out. And I'm not at that point sure if we even knew we had a parachute flare, but it's later on we read through all the stuff. We had fishing equipment, we had cans of water, like a liter for each person. We had biscuits, nice dry biscuits in a can. But and when you're hungry at sea, also fishing line and hook, so we could, and bait, so or lures, so we could try fishing. This is meant for the long term. But so no, it's a good question. Why didn't we use the flare then? I'm not sure they would have seen it or stopped, frankly. I'll get to that in a minute, by the way. That's a great question. So it was a long, long half hour. We didn't know if the ship had seen us, but we're starting to say maybe it did. And then we realized it is coming towards us. Yeah, it changed its course and we could see it coming towards us. And that was a really happy moment. I will tell you that at the time we were told Norway is the only country of seafaring nations that requires that there be a lookout person outside. Now, if you've ever seen nautical movies or whatever on TV, inside you have the captain, you have someone, the navigator, you may have someone doing other stuff, looking at the radar, and they're drinking coffee and talking about baseball or something. Outside, it's not so nice, particularly that night. It was raining, it was 50-mile-an-hour winds. Norway is the only country that required there be a person out on the fly bridge in the elements 24/7 whenever the ship was moving. We're really glad about that because that's the guy who saw us. His name is Harold Nielsen, H-A-R-A-L-D Nielsen. He was for some reason Norwegian, and it being a Norwegian freighter. And so Norway required that, I mentioned that, and he's the reason we were rescued. This article in the New York Times at the bottom in blue, it says the 12 men were taken from a life raft by a Norwegian freighter at 2 a.m. yesterday, the Coast Guard said, after the deck officer spotted flashlight signals. There was no deck officer. He's inside with his cocoa and his coffee saying, well, when I see my girlfriend in Oslo, we're going out to the... No. This was the poor schlub, the sailor, who probably was a low pay grade. But fortunately, every 4 hours, they put a new schlub out there. Anyhow, so thank you, Harold. My son lives in Oslo, outside Oslo. He lives in Norway now, has for about 8 years. He has tried using all of he's fluent, by the way, in Norwegian and Japanese, so he tried contacting Harold Nielsen or someone who knew him. I've tried it, not as effectively. We can't find the man. I don't know if he's alive, but boy, I'd sure like to buy him a steak dinner. Anyhow, so here's what happened. The S.E. Christine, it's 825 feet long, and the bridge is at the far stern, at the back of the ship. So here's the S.E. Christine, and it came forward to us, and it put itself, here's the wind, 50 mile an hour, here's the S.E. Christine, and here we are. What a good idea. The captain thought the ship would drift in to our raft, and they'd lower a rope, and we'd all climb up and be happy and dry and all that. Well, it turns out the wind had other ideas. It came either over the top or around the bow and the stern, and it blew us away from the S.E. Christine. So how many low points do we have so far? How many discouraging events? So blocking the wind did not work, and the ship sailed away. Are you keeping track? What are you up to, 7 unhappy events so far? And we assumed something good was going to happen, but I mean, why did the guy come so close, and then why is he leaving? Well, it turns out that ships of that era had a big engine. If anyone here has ever thought about how big the engine or the piston is in your car, anyone have an idea how big a car piston is? Yeah, like that, 3-4 inches, 2 inches maybe in a little car. The pistons on the SE Christine were 32 inches in diameter. And it was like 12 cylinders. I mean, we're trying to push this multi-megaton thing through the ocean at 10 knots, and that's a big engine. It's a diesel. How do you stop it and turn it around? Well, you turn off the fuel supply, you go and change a whole bunch of valves to turn the diesel into running the other direction, and then you start it up again with compressed air and hope to heck it starts. And it did. So the captain, Edmund Haakenson, Haakanson, he sailed the thing far enough away that they could stop the engine, take the time to reverse the direction, and then back up without running over us, which we appreciated. We thanked him afterwards. So that was plan B. He knew there was plan B. We didn't know there was plan B. We see the ship sailing away. Okay, so here's what happened. The ship came back, yay, and here's our little raft, and now we're on the windward side. It was cool being in the raft because there were mariners, sailors aboard the SE Christine, and when the ship rocked down, and the SE Christine was rocking and rolling, when the ship came down, we could almost shake hands with them. There wasn't enough time, but they were that close. You could go high five. We didn't do that either. But then they go up and they're out of sight. They're 30 feet above us, and then they come down again. They lowered a rope. They lowered a rope to us and then dragged us around the stern where it was much, much calmer. So there we are. Notice the life raft changed colors. And then they lowered a rope ladder down. And I don't remember climbing up, but I remember being in the life raft and I remember being up above. And everyone was that way except two guys. Two guys were so hypothermic they couldn't climb up. They weren't weak. They weren't particularly, frail or anything, but so Norwegian sailors helped them. Whether they went down and put them over their shoulder like a sack of flour or whether they lowered a belt and pulled, I don't know, but one of them is still alive. He's my buddy John. He lives in Pawcatuck, Connecticut, and he'll be at the next presentation of this in Noank, Connecticut. So John had to get lifted up, but he didn't complain. I mean, I was thrilled to be up above. Where are we now? Yeah. So records were set for the fastest ascent up a rope ladder. So this is our savior. This is the SE Christine. It was 1 year old, and our life raft was really tiny compared to it. But there we are in the gale, soaking wet, smiling like idiots. We're so happy to be aboard. So they brought out blankets, they made us take hot showers later. Even while we're out on the deck, they brought out cups, and is anyone familiar with a medicine they give to sick people called Johnny Walker? And it was Red Label, which is a certain level of goodness. The crew, they knew what they had. They had 12 men who didn't have clothes, because once we took off our clothes, we were naked. So they just threw in a big pile, and you went in and said, okay, this shirt will fit, these pants will fit. I wore shoes 2 sizes too small for a day and a half, and I was glad to be in pain, I'll tell you. So we slept very well that night. Now, there comes the captain, good captain, good control of the ship, and he's carrying a rifle. Now, we didn't know Norwegian legends and things that they do in Norway, but maybe it's a tradition. When you pick up sailors from the sea, you shoot the tallest one, or the cutest one, or the first one. I don't know what he comes out with his rifle. Why did he come out with a rifle? Anyone want to guess? To sink the raft, because if we left the raft to the wind, he obviously wasn't going to tow the raft with his ship. There's no purpose to it. He wanted to make sure that another ship didn't endanger itself by trying to rescue an empty raft. So he's shooting down. He took out the light on the canopy. There was a white light on the canopy, and he shot the flotation chambers. I don't know, he did 10, 12 shots, and we hoped that the thing sank. So that's all he could do. It was no longer a hazard to other ships. I was told by my captain to ask permission of the crew, the Norwegian crew, to go to the radio room. This radio room, this is the only picture I could find. This is from about 1920. So it's post-Titanic, but it's not 1969. And being a ham radio operator and very familiar, that was my field in college, was RF and antennas. So they sent me to the radio room, and I called the Coast Guard using the Boston Marine operator, and I said, Sea Surveyor sank quite a ways from here, we're not sure where. 12 men were aboard. We all were in a life raft for 27 hours. Everyone is alive and well and uninjured. And we're now on this ship, S.E. Christine, heading to Holland. Goodbye. And that was it. The next morning, this Coast Guard cutter, the Vigilant, shows up. And they were going to transfer us using what's called a breeches buoy. If you're not familiar with a breeches buoy, that's a good thing. Because these are all over Cape Cod, because if you have a ship foundering on the rocks, they fire a cannon actually with a thin rope to the ship, and then they pull across a bigger rope and a bigger rope and a bigger rope until it'll hold people, and then they put one of these things on and they drag it across, and then they put one at a time people from the ship, they come to Cape Cod, and they get a lobster or fried clams, whatever they want. This was going to be a ship-to-ship transfer. 20-foot waves, 50-mile-an-hour wind. Our captain said, Captain Hackinson, is it okay if we don't do this? Can you take us all the way to Holland? And he said, you will be our guests. So at that point, the Vigilant said, okay, and they went and did other stuff. No one was willing to transfer. Okay, so what are we up to now? Crisis incidents, about 7 so far? Okay, there we are. Life is good. I think they fed us breakfast. By the way, everything was fab. They treated us like we were the family of the owners of the ship. They could not have been nicer. It was great. And suddenly the engine stops in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And we start to roll again. And I'm saying, okay, where's the life raft? We're experienced life raft occupants now. I'm going to go after the sea biscuits. They're good, although we never tried them. Turns out the captain likes to fish when they're over fishing waters. So at this point, we're over what's called George's Bank. George's Bank has scallops and lobsters and clams and fish. The depth is something like 100, 120 feet. Not where the Sea Surveyor was, which was 12,000 feet. So the captain took his, we didn't see him do that, but the crew told us, don't worry, the engine will start up again. And sure enough, half an hour later, we were underway again. But for those first 10 minutes, it was like, how much more can we take? Okay. By the way, did I mention it was Norwegian? So what do they eat a lot of? Fish. So 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, or breakfast and dinner, or lunch and dinner. We had caviar, several kinds of caviar. The yellow stuff is from salmon, and the other stuff I'm not good at. Then another weird thing happened. I think it was the first meal, the breakfast meal the next morning. And we're sitting there, and a guy comes along, and he pours water in front of me on the tablecloth. And I say, well, that's like the guy with the captain with the rifle, but this is less threatening. Anyone know why they pour water on tablecloths? If you've been on a cruise ship in a storm, you're going to wear your dinner unless it sticks to the table, so it increases the friction. So it's something they do on cruise ships. They did it on the SE cruise. We rode that storm all the way to Holland. Not once did it stop rocking and rolling. They had to go 8 knots instead of 10, so we arrived 2 days later than we were scheduled to because of the storm. Well, we didn't care, you know, we were happy. By the way, I mentioned did they what? I missed that.
The Norwegians speak English.
Yeah, I'm formulating my answer. I heard the question the second time, thanks. Okay, if you ask me, how are things going in the United States right now? And I would say, well, we had the COVID, taxes are going up, everything costs more in a supermarket, it could be better. That's my informed answer from a college graduate. If you ask the lowest level Norwegian, you know, the guy driving a cab or sweeping the streets, how are things in Norway? And they will give a paragraph answer. They are so fluent, their vocabulary is better than mine because they learn English in school and they use it all the time. So most communication actually occurs between Norwegians in English, I'm told. So yeah, everyone spoke English, every single person. By the way, that is not me, don't get all excited.
Bond.
James Bond. 007, I'm 008, so that, yeah. So we stripped down, it took the showers, then we put on the clothing, so this is slightly out of order. But they treated us like it couldn't have been better. So I love engine rooms and I love the ship's bridge. And they said, anytime, go up anytime you like, talk to us, ask what's happening. We got a tour of the engine room, that's where I saw the spare pistons, 32 inches in diameter, and a wrench, which was at least the length from this column here to this column here. 5 guys couldn't pick it up. So they had cranes on the ceiling to pick up the wrench. When they had to do maintenance on this giant engine at sea, they had the stuff to do it. And they had the men who knew how to do it. One of the entertainments, remember they were there for 10 days on the trip. They showed movies. And if you are perhaps older than a young person, you might remember Hopalong Cassidy. The ironic thing is they turned the sound off. The sound was Hopalong Cassidy at this point saying, "Drop your guns now, you low-down cattle thieves." And what we heard, or what we saw, I should say, was the subtitle, "Slip Vabne na dere la Jurtjeviner," or however you say it. I don't do Norwegian. It was fun, though. S.E. Christine was 1 year old. Every part of it was new and shiny and beautiful. The paint was, everything about it was wonderful. It had a swimming pool outside, so when they were off Venezuela in the summer, they could swim in the pool. For some reason, we elected not to. They had a table tennis exercise room with a pool table. Try playing pool. Even table tennis wasn't possible. And a complete library, which allowed me to look at the maps, because everything was in Norwegian. And at that point, my Norwegian was nowhere near as good as it is now. Yes?
What type of vessel was it? Was it a passenger vessel? Was it a trade vessel?
It was very much a ore-carrying freighter carrying coal. At other times, it would go and pick up iron ore from Venezuela, I think, and carry it to wherever they refine the ore. They smelt the iron ore. It would go to Australia at times and pick up bauxite for aluminum. And so it went all over the globe, but it carried one thing. I was amazed they could accommodate 12 people. Both we ate with the officers. They treated us like kings. We didn't eat with the common sailors. We didn't mind. We loved the common sailors. They were great. There was a very, very sad thing, and I'm getting kind of near the end now, so I'll hurry it up. But we were so grateful. It's maybe like 3rd or 4th day in. We're eating gourmet food. We're wearing their clothes, actually washed our clothes, ironed them, and returned them to us. So by this point, we're wearing our original clothes. And we're bored, and we had skills. I did radio stuff. I did radar stuff. We had people who knew engine room. They could help rebuilding the diesel for the electricity. We had navigator people. We had another ship's captain who could do stuff. And we said to our captain, please go to see Captain Edmund Haakonsen and say, we're so grateful to you. Please let us help in any way on the bridge, in the engine room. Our guys will even, sweep the floors, clean the toilet, whatever you want. Our captain went to him. We weren't there. He went one-to-one, said what we asked him to, and the captain of the Norwegian boat said, thank you very much. That won't be needed. Everything's fine. For the next day, the poor sailors worked double shifts. There they are, scrubbing the floor that didn't need scrubbing, cleaning the toilet that had been cleaned an hour before. They worked double shifts, and was it our fault? Well, we were the cause of it, but we sure didn't mean that outcome. Fortunately, it blew over in about a day, but it was an unfortunate sociological accident, you might say. Anyhow, we finally get to Rotterdam, and I went to the very bow. That's the right up here, and there was a tugboat here. Remember, once that thing gets to port, it takes minutes for it to change direction. So it cannot, your cruise ship can pull in right now. They got bow thrusters, stern thrusters, midship thrusters, twin props. They can go in different directions. This thing had one prop, and it took minutes to go from forward to reverse. You may have seen ferries and things crash into docks. Yeah, well, that's what would happen if they didn't use tugs. So they used tugs, and there I am with my officer friend. He's got a radio directing the tug what to do, and the rope went quickly from this diameter to that diameter. And I'm familiar with rubber bands. You know, as a kid, I would shoot a rubber band or paper clip or something, and I see when the rubber band gets stretched, it gets thinner. And at that point, the officer I was said, "You will leave now." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Because if that line snaps or becomes disconnected from the tugboat, you will get cut in half. And I don't want to drag your two halves back." I said, I was gone. I mean, I was back. Here we are aboard the S.E. Christine. Our captain is in the white shirt on the right, you're right, and the captain of the S.E. Christine is on the left. So who's dressed better? Well, the guy who had the clothes. Our captain is wearing exactly what he wore when he jumped in the life raft and got wet.
Oh my God.
Nothing better, nothing worse. And we gave them that plaque. If you can see the plaque that's being handed off, that said, "To the S.E. Christine from the grateful survivors of the Sea Surveyor sink." It was very, very nice, and they hung it up somewhere. It was a nice thing. There we are at a news conference in Holland. So this was a Dutch news conference, not Norwegian. And my car extended warranty is fine, by the way, in case anyone's worried. So there we are, and just to point out, here is our captain in his white shirt. These are all Sea Surveyor survivors, and there's me. I had a beard, at least then I did. This is another survivor, Ernie. He lives in the Philippines now, and he doesn't travel anymore. Well, I'll just do that again. So, where are we? Okay, that's me in the middle. And that's the first mate, Richard Carlson. His wife, Millie, will be at the next showing of this presentation in Noank, Connecticut. His wife is 93. And I'll be, actually, if you want, I can play a couple of tapes. I don't know how much time. Kathy, how are we doing on time?
We're at 2:30, so we could have a few more minutes, yeah.
Okay. If there's time, I could play his voice. When the ship got to Rotterdam, when it got to the hotel, WSUB in Groton, 9:30 on the AM dial, I think, they called up and said, "I want to speak to the captain and the first mate." And I have a 5-minute recording of the first mate who died years ago, but and his wife will be at the next showing of it. So you can see we're all dressed like as we were when we got in the raft. Guess who the third person coming down the gangway is? Captain, first mate, me, wearing a life jacket, the only one. Why? Because I wanted to make some money tonight, and I knew 53 years after that, somehow this would come in handy. So, yeah, what do we say, $1.50? Yeah, all right. So, also, if I fell in the water, I wouldn't drown. It was a harbor, it was full of water, and I wanted to keep it as a souvenir. Now, we had a banquet that night. Now the guys are looking good, right? Here's John Grappelli, my buddy, so all our families packed suitcases, which General Dynamics / Electric Boat brought over to Rotterdam, and we could dress like civilized people for the banquet and the trip home. So there we were at the banquet. Now, Captain Lane knew something, but he didn't tell us on the raft. And every one of us is really glad he didn't. So that night he had a few Heinekens, which is it's like Gatorade in Holland. So no one got hypothermic. No one got when you get dehydrated. Yeah, we were okay that night, very okay that night. What he knew is that the entire time we were in the life raft, there was a longshoreman strike on the east coast of the United States. So what are we up to, 9 things now? That lessened our chances. The sea traffic was way down. Well, how come the S.E. Christine was there? It was carrying coal. So probably some port in Virginia had giant things that said, here's some for your hold number 1, here's some more for your hold number 2. And they filled, there were no longshoremen operating what longshoremen do. That's why the S.E. Christine was there. All the ships that required, whether they're coming in or going out, so they weren't on the ocean during that time. So were we lucky? Oh man, were we lucky. Yeah, here we are. We've just come back from Holland. This is KLM 707 aircraft, 4 engine, 2 on each wing. And we landed at JFK at the top. Well, there I am. No life jacket, by the way, at that point. I will tell you that was another trauma, not going through customs or immigration. The General Dynamics people, I don't know the strings they pulled, but we didn't have to stand in line. We didn't have passports. I didn't have a driver's license. I had no tattoos, nothing except my dental records to identify me. Right, Bob? Yeah. So 11 of them got right on the General Dynamics corporate jet and flew to Groton. My family, my wife's family and my family were in the Bronx, so I stayed in New York. But as the plane was landing, if you've ever been in a plane that landed perfectly, there's a thing called stall. So when it drops to a certain velocity, the wings lose lift. Now, if that happens like an inch above the runway, the plane goes, and you say, that's a good landing. I think we were 5 or 6 feet up when our captain stalled. I mean, it's a long way from Holland all the way to JFK, and bam, all the oxygen mask came down, most of the compartments open, stuff is falling all over. Did we need that as like the icing on, the cherry on the icing on the, no, we didn't need that.
Numbers are going up.
Yeah, we're at 10 or 11. So we completely bypassed customs and immigration, and we just did our thing. Real quick, this is the Coast Guard hearing at Electric Boat, January 30 and 31. The Coast Guard came from New York City. They had a lieutenant commander. His name was Alexander E. Tanos, T-A-N-O-S. And each one of us was interviewed separately. I heard a loud bang that woke me up from sleep. 2 other people, including the captain, heard a loud bang that woke them up or caught their attention. The others didn't hear the bang or said they didn't. We don't know to this day why the ship sank. I put in a Freedom of Information request to the Coast Guard January 4th of this year. And so far what I've gotten from them is essentially nothing. I can say it in Spanish, nada. Nothing at all. I've tried the Department of Transportation, under which right now the Coast Guard is under the Homeland Security Department. Back in '69, they were under Department of Transportation. Prior to that, they were under the Department of Treasury. It makes me crazy. I cannot get anyone to talk to me. They say they'll call back. They don't write back. It's very frustrating, and I'm pretty close to giving up. I'd like to see the report that came out. I actually have a newspaper article from January 6th, a year later, 1970, saying that the Coast Guard has finished the report. It will soon be released. This is in the Day newspaper in New London, the main newspaper in Groton, New London. And no one has seen it. No one can find it.
You're going to sink.
Sorry?
You're going to sink. That's that bang you heard before we sank.
Buildings. Right. I paid big money to have that. The timing was a little bit off, though. Yeah. So anyhow, let me just end this thing by saying, we never know why this is stuff up front. We don't know if something inside punched a hole in the hull, knocked the plate off. It sank really fast for a ship of that size. So we know it was a major hull breach. That's about all we do know. And I'd like to say thanks. Oh, yes?
Got a question.
Yeah, you bet.
Was the submarine in the same storm you were? And where were they?
Well, yes and no. If you're in a submarine,
I know you're below the,
yeah, they're 400 feet down, and they're going like this. They're going like this, and we're up above going like that. And they were, yes, they were in the area. We were due to rendezvous during the day. We never made it to the day. We sank 20 minutes after midnight.
Didn't they wonder where you were?
yeah, why didn't they do a Mayday for you?
There's a lot of interesting questions, and I have actually thought of those questions, and I'm still looking for the answers. I have the Navy log, allegedly, with conversations from the Greenling. A lot of it is Sub-Landcom Subgroup 2 called so-and-so, and the Admiral said, but nothing definitive. I think this Greenling eventually, after my phone call to the Coast Guard, when they knew the ship sank, they were asking the submarine Greenling to stand by in the area where maybe we would be found. We're already on the ship going to Holland at that point.
Yeah, but did your life raft have any kind of, to sending any kind of signals?
Oh, yeah, we had a flashlight.
No, other than that. No, I mean, to the sub.
Nowadays, there's a thing called an EPIRB. EPIRB stands for Electronic Position Indicating Radio Beacon. You'll find them on planes, you'll find them on crafts, and there's also one that generates a radar signal.
Yeah, they didn't have that.
And if you buy one now from Switlick, it comes standard. They didn't exist in 1969. Yeah, but the flashlight, you could do Morse code with it. Yeah, and I knew Morse code, being a ham. Sir, in the back.
Yeah. Well, you were on a secret mission, right? You were on a secret mission, rendezvousing with that submarine.
Okay.
Maybe that's why they didn't want to.
Yeah, the equipment on the submarine was secret. I didn't know very much about it. It was called the BRD-7. Now you're all going to have to get called by the FBI to no. You can Google BRD-7 and find out a little bit about it right now. It's long since been declassified. Okay. My part had nothing secret. It was an RF generator made by Hewlett-Packard. The frequency we were going to send it at was unimportant, so nothing I was doing was secret.
Well, General Dynamics. My question is, how come you didn't freeze to death? It lasted about 10 minutes in water that cold.
Well, we were in the Gulf Stream. The water was actually measured by the S.E. Christine and the Coast Guard, and it was 50 to 51 degrees. The Coast Guard cutter on its way there was in 30-something degree water because they were coming from New Bedford or that area, and they got to the Gulf Stream, but prior to that, they were in water that was much closer to freezing. So the Gulf Stream helped to keep us alive. Yeah. Someone else here had a question? Yeah.
I read the written account that you did during the pandemic, and you kept us nice and light and entertaining. But your written account is very frightening. Do you want to touch on what your real emotions were? You know, death in the face.
For those of you who don't know Dr. Alexander, that's my dentist for the last, I'm not kidding, 100 years, maybe 80 years, a long time. What I actually thought about right after we got in the raft, and everyone was in their own thoughts, is this real? Oh crap, why didn't I take something, whatever. I thought about my wife of 6 months, who I would never see again because I was going to die. I thought about the kittens that our cat, whose name was Stupid, gave. She had like 5 kittens. They were the cutest little things. They'd just been born, and I said goodbye to each one before I went to Groton to get on the Sea Surveyor. And I thought about all the dental work that had just been done. I'm not kidding. Because for the first time I had a salary. I was no longer a student. You know, eating ramen every night for dinner. I could actually afford a hamburger or something. So I did some dental work, which was a crowning achievement for me, but and you. And that, I said, why did we waste all that money? What a shame that was. Stupid, crazy, yes, but that's what I thought. It was very depressing aboard the thing. Sometimes, if I'm in a good mood, I'll put up the first slide, which you don't see, which is Tommy, the terrific tugboat, tows a totally something T transport or something. So I said, this started out as a children's book. I wrote the story as a children's book, and I sent it to several publishers, and they rejected it. They said, why don't you call it, We Are Very Likely to Die, having read the thing. So, I don't know. I like humor. Maybe you noticed. I think that's it. I don't think I want to take all your time to play the 5-minute thing from Richard Carlson. It doesn't say very much. What he does say is, oh, well, what was the cause of the sinking from WSUB? And he said, we will never know. The ship is 12,000. Oh, one funny thing, 12,000 feet down. So my boss, when I was still working, I worked there for 4 years. This is in the first 6 months. So my boss, John, you don't, when you're in a thing like the submarine antenna, you don't buy a signal generator. You get one from the equipment room. And when you're done with it, you put it back. And if you keep it for 5 years, they want it back every year to calibrate it and make sure it's accurate. And so about a year and a half after they're all down where you can find them in the Atlantic at the bottom, along with my wife's Martin guitar. She's still angry at me. And the equipment room said, John, we need your generators back. They have to be calibrated. And John wrote, you're welcome to them. He gave them the latitude and longitude. And he said about 12,000 feet down. But you'll see the ship. It's a big ship. They never bothered him again. So.
Thank you.
Did you have like check-in times with where you left to so they would know whether you were on course or you met with the sub or?
Oh yeah, the General Dynamics electric boat, every day at noon, the Sea Surveyor would do a radio telephone call saying, here we are, we're at about this latitude, this longitude, and we're doing well, and we're about to do whatever it is we do, or we just did it and we're heading back, and things are good. So they did that every day at noon. The first day, the Monday going out, they did make that telephone call. The second day, they didn't, because they did it at noon and we sank right after midnight, so they never got to noon. And so General Dynamics...
Something was wrong, then I would think.
Well, maybe they forgot to do it. I mean, it's so hard to get an answer.
It was 1969.
Yeah, I don't know. I do not know. I think most people knew, like the Coast Guard and the Navy and General Dynamics was my telephone call to, I'm not bragging, hey, I made the telephone call. It just happened to be at 1 a.m. After which I called my father-in-law because I knew he would be home. It was like 3 in the morning. You should see his pad of notes when I woke him up at 3 a.m. But he tried something about Norway, your ship, he sunk, don't worry. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything. I guess that's about it. So I'd like to thank. I would like to thank Kathleen Patrick for videoing that.
Should we all turn around and wave?
And well, if you're in the witness protection program, do not turn around and wave. But thank you all for coming. I really appreciate the audience.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.